Here we are, Major Michael Broch. Welcome to Focus Matters. It's great to have you here.
Oh, thanks. Good to be here.
So today's going to be a fun episode. Every episode's a fun episode. Today's going to be a fun episode because we're getting back into one of the topics that I find just really fascinating, which is the life and times of a combat pilot. And your background and your job are so unique and so interesting from just a human perspective, but I also think from a cognitive perspective. So we're going to dive in pretty quick, but a little bit of background on how we know each other. So you're currently out of Nellis Air Force Base, and you work with the 422nd Test Group, correct? So can you explain for the audience what that organization does? Because I don't think most people are familiar with it.
Yeah, absolutely. So, the 422 Test and Evaluation Squadron is what I'm a part of. So, in the Air Force, for flight tests, we break it in traditionally into two bins. Like once we get whatever piece of equipment or widget on the aircraft that we're going to test, it first goes through like the flight safety process, or it's called developmental test or DT, which is for the most part at Edwards Air Force Base. There's some that in California there's some that's done at Eglin in Florida. Once kind of that flight safety stuff is done, then it kind of gets kicked down the road to Nellis, to us at the 422 Operational Test Squadron. And now we start doing that operational test, where we take this new widget and figure out how we're best going to integrate it with our current warfighting concepts, or how effective is it? Does it meet the requirement? So in the 422, there's pretty much every fighter weapon system that we currently have fielded in the Air Force. And so there's different divisions within the squadron. I'm part of the F-22 division. And so, yeah, we'll get the new equipment and we'll go take it for a spin and figure out if it does what everyone said it was going to do.
Just going to throw something new on an F-22 and take it for a spin. Just another day in the office.
Yeah.
So let's frame some of this up because again, I've had the privilege now of spending time with you and other pilots. I've been to Nellis several times and starting to get a better understanding of this world. But if I have listeners who this is the first time they've heard someone with your background and someone with your job sort of explain things, let's give them a little bit of frame up. And then at some point we'll back up and talk about your history. So you're primarily an F-22 pilot.
Yes.
And the F-22 is a 5th gen fighter aircraft.
Correct. Yep.
So what does that mean? Because we hear about that. You see I think most of what everybody learns, we learned from Top Gun. Let's be frank, right?
Of course. Of course. Yeah.
And things like it. But 5th gen means it is the most current generation, correct? So this is the state of the art. So tell us what you can about just the F-22 and how it sits in this portfolio of aircraft that we have in the United States.
Yeah, absolutely. So I'll start with the 5th generation monikers. When the F-22 was developed, it was the first 5th generation fighter. And so they basically got first dibs, I think, on defining what that means.
Oh, great.
We typically bin it into a few different areas. For the F-22, it was low observable. So the stealth component of it, which is unlike 4th gen fighters that are typically larger from a radar perspective, easier to find and see. Everything about the Raptor was designed to be more stealthy in that regime on the radar front in particular. Super maneuverability was certainly part of it as well. So the thrust vectoring, when you go see an air show and see an F-22 do some crazy stuff that is fairly unique to 5th gen. Now, that I would say has started to become not part of the 5th gen, because you look at the F-35, it's not as maneuverable. That's just facts. That's not just me as an F-22 bias.
Not to belittle the F-35. Yes, right.
Additionally, the super cruise aspect. So for F-22, the ability to go supersonic without the use of afterburner. Again, that's another quality that has become less important over time. But so probably the last one that I think is the most impressive and speaks most to the human factors components of fighter aircraft is sensor fusion. So in a 5th generation fighter, I have many different sensors, the radars, passive systems, everything that's like either soaking in energy and trying to make sense of it within their own stovepipe for that sensor. The beauty of 5th gen is all of those inputs that are coming into those disparate sensors just get fused on my displays, where I don't have to kind of put what's the radar warning receiver is telling me about how I need to defend myself over here and what the radar is telling me. I don't have to put that together in my brain like a 4th gen pilot does.
Mm,
It
okay.
just gets put on the glass on my displays for me to action on immediately. The decision speed is just much faster typically just because that it's taken that cognitive load off of the 5th gen pilot. So
Fascinating.
um,
Okay.
yeah, so
So, but
I
there's a
would say
trade-off. So it's taking the cognitive load off of the pilot in terms of having to do sort of assimilation processing. So we had Bain on the show. Bain flies a 3rd gen. Then is that correct?
4th gen.
He flies the 4th
Yeah,
gen. Bain's gonna Bain's gonna put a check mark next to my
no,
name.
I like that. I like
Um,
that.
but as he described it, I'm not sure the sensor array is the same. Is that right? For the F-22.
Correct. Yeah, different. Same like class. So it's like a airborne intercept radar, for example. Radar is the classic one, where yeah, different radar for Strike Eagle F-22, but how the jet processes the data that the radar gains and then displays it to the pilot, very different, wildly different
Mm, mm.
in Strike Eagle versus an F-22.
Okay.
Yeah,
So the plane is doing some of the processing for you, but at the same time, you have the ability to go faster and be more maneuverable.
true statement. Yeah. So and ultimately the jet is based on a whole generational leap in the sensor technology itself. I'm seeing a lot more, or the jet is seeing a lot more than a 4th gen fighter typically will as well. So it's
Mm,
assimilating as best it can, but there's still a lot to process from your executive functioning on like making
mhm.
sense of what the display is telling you, and you're seeing a lot more. So your sphere of influence is much larger, potentially in a 5th gen fighter versus 4th gen, um, based on that sensor technology.
So let's ground this in something that the average person might be able to compare it to. I'm going to drive my car, and my car is somewhat state of the art. I've got radar detection, or imaging that'll tell me if I'm going to crash into something on the sides, and that really useful warning signal that comes on right before I'm about to hit something in front of me. And if I have a really cool car, and a Mazda that had a heads up display that I thought was absolutely state of the art, right? So I had this little heads up display, and it would show me Google Maps if I had it projected. That's the average person's take on I'm going fast. I'm assimilating information. That, I assume, if we're talking about how do we calibrate this? If that is on a scale of 1 to 5, you would scale that a blank, and flying an F-22 and the amount of information you're having to assimilate and respond to, where does it end up on the scale?
I'd say for the analogy's sake, that's pretty close to what 5th gen gives you. So, um, more sensors than a traditional car like my Dodge Ram is. Yeah, I don't have any of the bells and whistles in it. Uh, I have to do all the backing up on my own via the mirrors, that kind of thing.
That's
Uh,
crazy.
I know, yeah, crazy. Like that is like 4th gen. I would say like none of this, radar for assessing your distance in front.
Mhm.
At least my wife's car yells at me to like take a break. It's like how what? Like through like the
Wait,
eye tracking
your
or something. So
F-22 doesn't tell you to take a break?
it does not. It does not. But I'd say it's that level of awareness. I think that state of the art vehicle gives you is fairly 5th gen esque in this analogy compared to your traditional vehicle that is, you know, none of the frills.
But the cognitive demand of driving your truck versus driving your jet has got to be on just a completely different magnitude. That's what I'm trying to get at. It's like, how can
Yeah.
we, those who don't
Okay.
fly, try to think of what is the amount of cognitive processing that's required, and the load. And this is before we get into the environmental conditions. Just the absolute urgency of data. Is it
Yeah.
is there any way to calibrate that?
I've heard it described a lot as being similar to a position in sports like a quarterback in
Mm,
football. And that's,
mhm,
I'd say, pretty much every fighter pilot is going through a similar demand. So not only is there's a large physical component, you're going fast, you're having to fly the airplane, just do the thing, throw the ball, but that portion of it has to become through training over time second nature where I don't even
Hmm.
think about it. My hands
Hmm.
just do things because
Hmm.
I need all of this up here to be thinking about 2, 3 steps down the road. Like, what's my strategy for this threat that's coming my way? Like, what play are we gonna run next? I mean, I'm not a football guy. Same martial arts. I know we've talked about that.
Hmm.
Not
Hmm.
only do I have to like focus on hitting and getting hit and reacting to that, but having a strategy. How am I going to get around that person's guard? Is very similar, I would say, to the loads that a fighter pilot is under.
The
Uh, I- yeah, go ahead.
one of the obvious callouts, though, being that, especially in martial arts, you're engaging in proximity. But correct me if I'm wrong. With the F-22, one of the advantages is you're engaging it at larger distances than planes before it, right?
True. Yeah, you start well beyond visual range. We still train a lot to within visual range because there's a common joke that they call missiles for a reason because they're not hittles. They miss. And so you have to have that skill set for like, hey, when you're low on weapons, and you have to go to the merge, i.e., that visual range
Mm,
proximity environment,
mm.
know how to handle yourself, and that's I'd say probably the most dynamic and just you have to develop that skill set for reacting in the appropriate manner because there's just no time to do a lot of that strategizing. It's just a muscle memory, just
Yeah,
like the
sure,
martial arts. So yeah,
sure. Yeah, so there's zones here of processing.
yeah,
There's
mhm,
there's the furthest zone where it's probably very conscious decision making. You're taking in a lot of information, but you can almost monitor your thinking and your processing. Then you must
absolutely.
reach
Yeah.
a level of engagement. Again, it's similar in martial arts. I like the metaphor, so we'll stick with it. So we talk about ranges in martial arts, right? There's a range where you're too far away to hit me and I'm too far away to hit you, and I can do all sorts of thinking. Then there's the next range where we're within long distance weapon. Maybe if you're good with your feet, okay, I have much less time to respond. And it's a different set of skills. And then of course there's close range, which is if I let you get into close range, similarly, something's gone wrong, right?
Yeah,
My
yeah,
missiles
exactly.
didn't do what they were supposed to do. My voice didn't do what it was supposed to do. Now we're this close. I can't think anymore. I just have to react. Except you're still reacting at speeds that I think are hard for most of us to understand. Because when you're engaging, again, you'll share what you can and what you can't. But when you're engaging um, an enemy, theoretically, if you're engaging an enemy, you're going how fast? What's the range?
Typically we're just under the Mach.
Mm,
So anywhere from, yeah, we think in terms of Mach versus like a miles per hour
yeah, yeah.
type number, but close equivalent would be about 1,000 miles an hour you're going. I just had
And they're
our like,
going.
and they're going at the same time. So at the
Right.
closure, then you double that. Um, so yeah, to your point, at range, it does feel like, hey, I can think about this, but it's still all happening very fast and can
Yeah.
change very fast. Yeah. So I think that kind of covers at least the fifth gen component, unless you think there's
No, no, I think that's
other
great.
ways.
So I'm curious, you train, so you fly for test and you're an instructor,
Correct.
right? So
Yes.
you train and qualify other pilots. And you've done that for most of your career because you've been in the military since 2012. Is that when you first started?
Right. Correct.
So
Yeah.
so let's pause there for a moment. Take us through some of those key moments in your career. Did you know that you wanted to be an instructor when you first started flying? Did you have a sense of where you wanted your career to go? And then I'll stop us as we go when we hit sort of these landmarks that I think are really important around the story of cognition.
Yeah. Sure. I'd say like when I first started, it wasn't like beginning with the end of being an instructor in mind. What
Mhm.
you soon discover as you start flying as a wingman in the beginning, once you get qualified in like the F-22 or the Strike Eagle, is that the end of the road, if you want to keep doing this job, which, like you said, it's like the fact that I get to go to work every day in my office is the jet, is I still pinch myself, but
Yeah. Good.
The idea is like, hey, if you want to keep doing it, you got to progress. And
Mhm.
instructor slash evaluator is a qualification you have to get to
Mm.
still be useful at my age to the Air Force. Um, so yeah, I think early on, I mean, I knew I wanted to do this for as long as it let me. Um, and so quickly I was like, yeah, I have to be an instructor. And I did enjoy teaching, and I still do enjoy teaching the young pilots how to do the job. Because there's that sense of,
When did you
yeah,
cross
go ahead.
that bridge? So when you first started, you were at Laughlin, you were in a flying training wing. And I'm looking at my notes, then you were at Tyndall, and then Langley. All through this, you're still flying in a flight lead, right?
Yeah. Yeah. So, yeah, to back up, because it is important, I think, to understand that, to get to the level of even just being a wingman and a fighter, there's so many crucibles you've gone through up till that point to make it there. So,
And a
yeah,
wingman, what is
commission.
a wingman for lay purposes?
Yeah. So, in fighter tactics, pretty much every fighter that exists right now, builds their tactics on this assumption that you're there not just by yourself, you have friends there and you're a team and you work. So for F-22, four ship. A four ship of F-22s is our basic fighting unit
Okay.
that we'd go to battle with. So when you've gone through all the crucibles to even get to the point where you're flying the F-22, which I'll cover quickly here in a minute.
Hmm.
The first qualification you gain in a combat unit is wingman.
Okay.
So in our typical four ship construct, number two and number four in the formation are the wingmen.
Got
And
it.
you're basically a voice commanded killing machine is what the expectation is. You have a lot more autonomy in an F-22 and fifth gen just because of the sensors and the awareness that the jet gives you than I think the expectation was in the last generation, like fourth gen. But still, you're expected to run the default tactics that's written down for our
Hmm.
manuals as a wingman. And then if my flight lead or element lead, number one or number three, respectively, tell me to do something, I'm supposed to execute violently what they just told me to do. And so
Okay.
all the like quarterbacking, like strategy of the fight that goes beyond our four ship is not the concern of two or four. Two or
Got it.
four as a wingman, you're left. Just kill
Great.
my group.
So that's no, I love it. So that's a great frame. So the first phase is competency, obviously. And I have to be proficient, but I am proficient to the structure. So you have
Correct.
some
Yeah.
autonomy, but you are being called to action, you are being directed. So it's when you cross from wingman into, and then we'll talk about next stage, that's got to be maybe that really first cognitive shift where suddenly not only you're responsible for executing the mission, but you're responsible for leading the mission.
Absolutely. Yes. Wingman, single ship execution. You're flying your own jet to the best possible level. That's the expectation, that you can run the tactics, you do the thing by yourself. Order of magnitude to now, or jump to get to the flight lead for F-22. Typically go through a two ship flight lead upgrade where now, sure, the four ship's a basic fighting unit, but we also have tactics for a two ship or a three ship for whatever reason somebody falls out. And so now you become a leader of one and you go through a qualification training to not only, fly your own jet, do all the things you were expected to do as a wingman, but now you are in control of a wingman and you're
Mm.
in charge of how your two ship is employing in the context of a larger mission, like a defensive counter air scenario, where I'm defending a base or something. Um, the why is an order of magnitude is because if you're still consciously like working through the left hand, right hand, and execution at single ship level, you struggle a lot in the flight lead standpoint because it's a whole new level to be thinking more now, like at the bigger tactical level of deciding, hey, do we need to commit? Do we need to go this way now, or do we need to kill this group now? It's like, so all of that decision making is now on your shoulders. In addition to, hey, I got to fly my jet, and I kind of have to fly his jet a little bit or her jet a
Uh-huh.
little bit over here.
Uh-huh.
Um, So that's the next level. And then we make it even harder. You do the 4-ship. Now you've got 2 more people, and I can do more things with the 4-ship. So like your sphere of responsibility has just increased another order of magnitude for sure. And then
Oh, that's interesting
eventually,
because
yeah, go ahead.
as you go to four, well, I guess every time you add a ship, your capacity as a unit increases. It's not just that you have another ship, but the range of what that group is capable of is significantly different. Yeah, that's
Yeah, and
interesting.
that's probably, and that is only the case with good flight leads. So
Mm,
it is very much part of the skill set that you learn is how to effectively run this team that you now have. What responsibility do I load shed to 2, 3, or 4, and what do I keep solely to myself? The best flight leads will make it such that they come up with the plan for this mission, and if they've done it right, I as one am saying very little, or I have to say one word or one phrase. And now that sets off a cascade of events that I've briefed my team to go execute with. So
mm,
we call those contracts for the purposes of like the planning and the briefing.
hmm.
So yeah, you can it can absolutely make it a force multiplier. Or if as a young flight lead, like everybody did going through, you don't know really how to do that effectively, and so you keep it all on yourself. Then 2, 3, and
Oh,
4 are like just waiting for one. Are
mm,
you going to tell us what to do?
right,
And you just
right. Leadership.
goes downhill
Yeah.
fast. Yeah, yeah, right.
So in your personal journey, in that process, did you really notice the changes as you made those progressions? And was there ever a time where you found yourself wondering, gee, I don't know if I have the capacity to do this? Or did it always feel like, no, I was made for this, or some combination of the 2?
No, for me, the biggest hurdle was 4-ship flight lead
Mm,
upgrade. I had up till that point done fairly well, I guess, for in the B course with the single ship execution. I could practice that in the sim until my, eyes bled. I could read the documents and I knew it by heart. And so the single ship execution was typically not or wasn't as big of a challenge for me at
mhm.
least. And so I got put into 2-ship flight lead upgrade fairly quickly. Um, the downside of that, I guess at 2-ship flight lead, there's not a lot you can do with the 2-ship.
Mm,
I mean, like I said, it's a big order of magnitude shift, but for the missions that we were doing in the upgrades, someone's done it before. And so you kind of look at what the other guy or gal did, and there's a lot of like handing down of how to do it
mhm.
from one level to the next. That pretty much stops at 4-ship flight lead upgrade, where every mission is kind of different from the person who last went through the upgrade did, and so you kind of you have to know how to do that. And so I think the
Interesting.
biggest thing I struggled with was coming up with that, like looking at a tactical problem. All right, this is the mission we're going to go execute. The environmental factors are these. The enemy is this. The effect we need to achieve is this. Based on this problem, come up with a solution in time and space, and it's all while you're moving at 1,000 miles an hour. And so, um, it was that like
I like
that.
I like the way you casually drop that. While you're because I do all that, but I'm sitting in front of a computer screen in a Teams meeting.
Right, right. And I will say you typically have like a day prior to the event of execution to think through this, come up with your whole plan. But it was that creative component of, how are you going to beat this enemy? How are you going to come up with the plays that are going to take advantage of the weaknesses of this enemy that you're going up against? And then communicate that to a team in a way that's simple and easy to understand. Um, because, that's probably the biggest hallmark of a good plan is got to be simple and executable. You might come up with this awesome idea, but if I can't communicate it or execute effectively, it's not going to work. So I really struggled with that because again, up till that point, it was kind of like, well, I'll just do what the previous person did, and that when that wasn't available to me anymore, um, that became fairly challenging. And kind of personally, I knew by that point that I wanted to get as high as I could in the qualifications for being a fighter pilot. Like it was my calling at that point. And so the highest rung of that ladder is to go to weapons school, be a weapons school graduate, and be an instructor of the instructors. And so, um, on the personal front, when I started to struggle and fail in that arena, I had like my heroes that are trying to teach me, like I I felt like I was letting them down and I was disappointing them. And it was all this external baggage that I was carrying along instead of kind of keeping it focused on what I needed to do and kind of have that intrinsic like confidence, like, hey, or like that growth or failure is okay mindset. I had not quite developed as well as I thought I did at that point.
Mm.
So I eventually got through it. But it took me a lot longer than I thought it would. And yeah, that was
So thank you for sharing that. So what I'm hearing is that the transition for you was more mindset than actual cognitive capacity. And I think it's important to tease those out, right? Cognitive capacity to me would be you're in this lead position and we talked about it in the Bain episode. You're just constantly ending up in helmet fire. And again,
yeah.
correct me if I don't use terms
No, yeah. No,
correctly, but
accurate.
you're flying and you're over processing. You're hitting this point where I can't process anymore, and your performance starts to degrade. You may not notice it. Hopefully somebody's going to call it out and be like, Mach, you know, you're behind
Yeah.
the jet, right? Or whatever the
Right.
appropriate phrase is. But it sounds to me like for you, it was a bit more just the mindset of I can grow into this than an actual capability shortcoming.
Yeah, no, I'd agree with that.
Okay.
Yeah, I was like, rarely did I feel like I couldn't make a decision airborne. It was just not knowing what the right decision was,
Mm. Uh-huh. Uh-huh.
which I think speaks to that as well. Being willing
Uh-huh.
to make that, just make the call. It might be wrong. You're about to find
Mm.
out in the debrief if it was wrong or not, and we'll go do it again the next day. I mean, there's certainly pressure too to, if you take forever to get to the upgrade, you'll get removed from the upgrade,
Mm.
and
Interesting. Yeah.
maybe you get another shot at it later or not. So there's certainly pressure that if you want to get to that top rung of the ladder, that you got to do well at all times. And
There's a trajectory
um,
they expect you to maintain. Yeah.
correct,
Sure.
yeah,
Yeah.
yeah. Which that certainly, and we could talk about it later if we have time, but that certainly influenced how I kind of ran uh, the squadron when I came back from weapons school and became a chief instructor, just because I know it influenced my development so much, that false kind of paradigm that I had at the time. But
Well, let's talk about that a little bit because again, I'm always trying to think about listeners who haven't, believe it or not, haven't listened to all the episodes uh, and are jumping in for the first time. So let's talk about weapons school. And when did you get to weapons school? What did that experience represent for you, both personally and in terms of your career? Were there any challenges you had to face there? And walk us through that experience.
sure, absolutely. I'll quickly run through the like crucibles that I said I was going to earlier. So to get to the weapons school, because I think it'll help frame kind of how long along the road you have to be to even qualify. Like you mentioned, when I first graduated the academy, I got a pilot training slot. So I went to pilot training. That's a year long. And that's
Uh-huh.
just flying Air Force aircraft. You get tracked into like, are you going to be a fighter pilot? Are you going to be a bomber pilot? Are you going to be a tanker pilot? There's multiple, checkpoints along the way where they rack and stack 1 through 25 in your class. And then, all right, number 1 gets his first choice. Number 2 gets whatever's left, so it's kind of that
Was that the way it
meritocracy.
works? Okay.
That is
Yeah.
basically how it works. And
Okay.
there's a little bit of luck and timing to that, because it's the Air Force basically says, hey, for this class of pilot trainees, here's the aircraft we need pilots for. And
Mm,
maybe the one aircraft you really wanted isn't on that list. Tough. You
mm.
you you get your second choice. So um,
And generally, once you pick an aircraft, that's it, right? It's a marriage. You're married to
there's
that aircraft.
there are ways to change to other aircraft, but it is becoming more and more rare. You typically stay in your aircraft for um, like when a new aircraft comes online, like F-35. There was a lot of people they asked to like, hey, do you want to go fly the F-35? And so there are people they'll pull from other
Mhm,
fighters. But yeah, you're with it your whole career typically, unless they retire the airframe or you want to
mhm.
really change.
Okay.
Um, so finish the pilot training, I got F-22s, and so you go to a what's called an Introduction to Fighter Fundamentals course, which is a screening program. So pilot training said, yeah, this person should be a good fighter pilot. That intro to fighter fundamentals is where they try to weed out if that's actually the case. That's a
Hmm.
couple months long. Then you finally end up at your qualification course for your airframes. For F-22, that was at Tyndall at the time. For me, that was another year to get through that. And then you finally end up after, on order of 2 to 3 years from you initially starting pilot training, you end up at your combat unit, which for me, that was the 94th Fighter Squadron at Langley. And that's
Hmm.
where you go through the mission qual, which can take another 3 to 6 months, and you become a wingman. Uh, from wingman to instructor took me my whole assignment at Langley. So that was about 2.5, 3 years actually, which it's not um, common or expected necessarily. Like you have to be an instructor by the end of your first assignment. In fact, it's pretty tough to do, especially with the ops tempo, like how often folks are on the road these days. You don't always have the time to go through the upgrades as fast. But yeah, I became an instructor there and went to go back to the mission qual course at Tyndall, and I taught as an instructor there, and that's when I got picked up to go to weapons school. But the only reason I go through all that is, to even get to instructor qualification for when you start takes on order of from pilot training start to instructor 5 to 7 years, I guess.
Mm.
Um, and you only become eligible to go to weapons school when you are a qualified instructor and you have, at least in the fighter weapons schools, a qualified instructor with at least 50 hours of instructional time under your belt.
Okay. So you're an instructor, you're at a base, you have at least 50 hours of instructional time, getting called to weapons school. And again, I think from a public non-military domain, the easiest way to understand this is Top Gun because it's the reference point, right? Weapons school is really the top. It's not exact, but it's basically the Top Gun of the Air Force. So now you're getting pulled to this master train the trainer program. That's what weapons school
right.
really is, right?
Yeah. So when you're just a line instructor in your unit, the chief instructor is always a weapons officer, always a graduate,
Okay.
and at least in a fighter unit, always a graduate of the weapons school. So it's that position that you're getting trained to do, to
Mm,
be the instructor of the instructors.
yeah.
And yeah, you interview for it, you send your resume in, and then you get picked up or you don't. But yeah, functionally equivalent to Top Gun. Uh, it's longer than Top Gun, just
Hmm.
because in addition, Top Gun's very focused on single ship execution and becoming the best that you can in your airframe. Whereas Weapons School does that, but takes it one step further, where you have to go through integration training. So you figure out how your cog in the machine fits in with all the other cogs in the machine, so that when you graduate, not only are you the expert in your airframe and how to teach other people how to do it, but you could be called to be part of a mission planning cell for something like a Midnight Hammer
Mm,
and know how to talk the right language of other combat capabilities to figure out how we're going to fit all these things together to execute together.
yeah. I think that's another great call out and potentially another one of those threshold moments
Yeah,
where
yeah,
it's like each one of these, you're increasing your capacity, your emotional capacity, your cognitive capacity. And so now you know how to run the four ship and you know how to train and you know how to take people through the cycle. Okay. But now we want you to think about not just your four ship. We want you to think about how this fits into the entire machine. And now we're actually going to plan something, and I'm sure you're always running war games and simulations and such, but now we're going to plan something that's real. And it's amazingly intellectual is what I think most people don't get. Because again, whether it's media or the fact that for the most part, I think the general public interacts with more junior or younger or entry level service people, and because people ask me all the time, especially with what's going on in the world right now, like there's a lot of there's a lot of stress in the world, and we are now the Department of War at war, and there's no getting around it. It's hard to be incredibly comfortable with that concept, even if we think it's for the right purposes. It's still war, and so I get asked by a lot of people, "How do you feel about talking and working with these people?" And I say, You'd be amazed at first of all the level of dignity and just character that everybody I have the opportunity to talk to brings. But I also don't, I think people don't understand, like, these are not unintelligent people. This is an intellectual job that you have. And as you say, it's beyond that, because you have to have the intellectual capacity of a planner that can see several horizons, right, further than the line of sight. But then you also still need to be able to run the show. And so it's this wonderful hybrid. Just my observation.
No, to your point, from start to finish in my whole career being a fighter pilot, um, I have found like the above the neck demands way more challenging than anything physical associated with
Mm,
flying a fighter jet. Period.
mm.
Dot. Hardest thing you do is pull G's, but even that, like, you get used to it. But the demands on the planning side and figuring out how to employ and the creativity required, it only gets harder as warfare becomes more and more complex. So, yeah, to your point, there's a huge intellectual component to it that, yeah, the weapons school certainly stresses a lot. So, um, you asked about, how the weapons school changed things for me. I say when I decided I was going to go and I got in, I looked back and reflected a lot on that fourth ship flight lead upgrade and how, like, I didn't think I was going to make it to the weapons school if something like that happened to me again.
Mm.
And so that's when I really started to dig into, how to manage the mindset component stuff. Just reading books on mindset,
What stood out? Do you
meditation.
remember? Let's take
What's
let's
that?
take those one at a time, because I think this is the really juicy stuff for this podcast. So when you think back, were there any books that were really pivotal for you?
Honestly, it's not uh, binned as this, but everything to do with Stoicism, I gobbled right up. It's that focusing on what you can control,
Hmm.
and controlling it as best you can, and not letting the external influences throw you off your game. Like, I probably got the most practical advice and actionable insights from reading Meditations by Marcus Aurelius.
Really, from Marcus
And
Aurelius.
I,
You
but I
went
would
to the
say that was,
source. You didn't even go to
yeah.
Ryan Holiday. You really went to the source. Yeah.
Yeah. Um, but I would say that was a springboard for looking into, like, okay, yeah, sure, this is what, an ancient philosopher thought about these things. Does it kind of marry up with, modern? Because I had a biology background from the academy, and I've always been interested in the human component and the optimization of the human. And that did kind of align with, obviously meditation. I distinctly remember at Squadron Officer School, which is officer development school that every captain goes through, a speaker that talked about meditation and the evidence-based components of that, and that resonated with me. And so I developed a habit of, for at least 10 minutes every day. Before I knew what I knew now from my master's, at weapons school and prior, I would do just mindfulness meditation. And at the
Traditional Vipassana, sitting, observing your breath,
yes, yep,
just
um,
being in the moment, letting go of your breath. I mean, letting go of thoughts, and just like really
yes,
traditional mindfulness. Okay.
yep. And
Yeah.
as simple as it sounds, at least at weapons school, that became, in addition to a couple other techniques that I used, one of the most important things that I held on to at the weapons school compared to everything else. So, weapons school tries to take away every minute of your time. Like, there's always something to do. You're in the pressure cooker always. Even when you go home, you're kind of thinking about the next day, and you're probably still planning, even though you ran out of time at work. And so, but no matter what, 10 minutes every day before I went to sleep was mine. And that was my 10 minutes. And that's what I did.
Nice.
And
Nice.
helped me sleep
Hmm.
better, I think, just because otherwise the ruminating thoughts, it just always going. Um, but that, in addition to, cognitive, um, like reframing. So even just becoming conscious of that inner dialogue, or like
Hmm.
you watch someone walk down the street, and it's like you make a judgment about them, like, or a lot of people do, and being conscious of the fact, like, you just made a judgment, like, why, why did I do that? Like,
Well, I'm a New
is it,
Yorker, so that's what
yeah,
we
yeah,
do.
yeah, right.
Sure,
Um,
sure. So meta awareness, developing the ability to reflect back and see, oh wow, this is really what my mind is doing all the time.
Yeah. So that,
Yeah.
because often, and I know this is the case for me, like we all get into these negative thought process and thought spirals, and it's arresting that. Like, and
Hmm.
failure was a good point. Like at weapons school, you fail all the time.
Mm.
And I had some good advice from other instructors. When I was getting spun up to go to weapons school, that just like I distinctly remember, and it was so silly. I still did it though. It was like, hey, you got your notebook in front of you, right? When you're taking notes with the instructor, right? They're going to be telling you how terrible you were, how you need to do better here, there, and the other. Like every now and then, just write in your notebook, just like I'm the man, or or I don't agree with what you just said. Just like having that, resistance to the negative that's always coming your way,
That's interesting.
made a
That's
difference.
interesting.
So,
Well, that's really
yeah,
interesting because you said this earlier. I mean, that is metaphorical for what we do to ourselves, right? So at weapons school, you've got this culture, and I think again, it is a very military culture of we're going to give you a lot more negative feedback than positive feedback, right? It's sort
yeah,
of
yep,
the ultimate example of tough love. Because if you can't handle the negative feedback, you don't deserve the positive feedback. I mean, something
yeah,
along those lines. I'm not sure that inside our own heads, most of us aren't the same way. And so, yeah, I do. I mean, I do the same. A lot of the practices you talk about, Stoicism is such an interesting practice because it is so fundamentally grounded in reason. I think is why it's appealing for people. It's not
mhm,
mysticism, it's
yeah,
rationalism. And so
yeah,
this whole idea of just recognizing who we are and what things are and what you have control over and what you don't is when you can indoctrinate that into your life becomes so incredibly powerful. And then adding meditation, I think, is so important in yeah, in the years that I've been in this work, much more on the mental skills and personal development side, meditation instructor, yoga instructor, etc. The key that people often miss is this practice period because you can read about stoicism and it can make sense, but if you don't have a practice, which you discovered, where you actually, it's just you, a practice is just you and your stuff. And meditation's one of them, and mindfulness is very approachable. It's not the only one. But this ability to sit and just notice your stuff and be okay with it and let go of it, and then find some sense of peace, which it sounds like you did, and some sense of stillness, which it sounds like you did, in this pressure cooker that they call the weapons school. That's fantastic. That's magical.
yeah, and to your point, it's probably the thing that took me the longest to finally appreciate is it. To your point, I read the book and it's like I should be. I know I have the knowledge. I can now execute on that knowledge, but it's the putting in the work, and you have to be disciplined about it and catch it every single time that that thought happens or you're going down that path. And so you have to, I think the word I wrote in, like when I was journaling about it, is like to be relentless about it. You have to
Mhm,
catch yourself all the time, to make it to the point where it just starts to happen naturally,
mhm.
that you've cognitively rewired how you're thinking through these types of problems. And so, yeah, those experiences at weapons school, in addition to just being then an instructor and trying to figure out how to get the best out of everyone that comes your way, definitely made me super interested in the field of psychophysiology and doing the masters, and everything we're talking about in this podcast is just, you know, um, people struggle, and I'm a case study so much, just for lack of that knowledge or being taught in addition to the skill set you're learning, fighter pilot, as an example, um, putting in the time and effort there is important. But if your own stuff isn't
Mhm,
right and ready, then
mhm, mhm.
um, it's not going to stick, or I'm going to waste my time trying to teach you these skills when you've got all this other baggage going on that is making it
Yeah,
go one in the air out the other. I've certainly
yeah.
had students that have been in that bucket. So yeah,
I have a question for you. So you're now you're so you were at weapons, now you're at test. There's some movement back and forth between those two, right? Are you or
yeah.
do you cycle back and forth? Are you at test now for a period of time? And at test, are you still an instructor?
Yeah, so that's a good segue, I guess, to talk really briefly about. So when you graduate weapons school, you go back to a combat unit. For me, it
Hmm.
was in Alaska, and you are now the chief instructor. For me, it was like 2.5 years. So if the when you deploy, you're coming up with, or you're called to go to combat or something, you're the one coming up with a tactical plan for how you're going to execute in the context of the war or whatever. So I did that for a couple of years, and then I went back to Nellis to teach at the weapons school, which was 2022 to 25 for me. And then now I just went down the street and joined the 422 and did that to do the operational test stuff, which was last summer. So the
Okay.
fact that it's right down the street, we fly the same jets for F-22s at Nellis as the weapons school. So there's always this dialogue back and forth. There's a lot of weapons school graduates at Test, but not all of them. And so it's having the experience that is the weapons school, like the warfighting experience, but then the intellectual knowledge base at of the operational analysts that are at Test is a really nice, because it is kind of a team effort to come up with, yeah, we get this new widget. Let's understand at a scientific level, but also how to employ it at a tactical level kind of requires both skill sets there.
Interesting.
So every now and then, yeah, I'll get called to fly back with the 433rd and the weapons school, but it's not very common. But I could.
Okay. Okay. So do you still meditate?
I do. I'll say I've kind of refined it a little bit more. I had someone describe it to me in my master's program, like biofeedback and breath work. Is if you look at mindfulness meditation as an analogy of like I'm going to shoot my rifle. I want to get better at marksmanship. I could shoot the steel, just like a steel plate, and
Mm-hmm.
get better for sure.
Mm-hmm.
Or I could put the paper up there with the concentric rings and be more like get more out of that training experience to get more precise. That's kind of how I look at biofeedback and heart rate variability, biofeedback and breath work
Mm-hmm.
as kind of
Mm-hmm.
mindfulness meditation. Zooming in a little bit more, I get the operant conditioning benefit from it. Uh, yeah, so I still do, but it's more with the biofeedback stuff.
So you're doing biofeedback now?
Yeah. So when I did my master's, I got a certification to my board certification in biofeedback from so it's called BCIA, the Biofeedback Certification International Alliance. Basically, just to show that I have the competency to provide biofeedback services for optimal functioning,
Nice.
not clinically, just
Right.
optimal
Right.
functioning because I'm not
Right.
licensed. So yeah, I have my and go through the masters that we had to buy our own biofeedback devices, and so once I learned how to do it, I was like, okay, I'll just do this on my own for my own practice.
So are you so in the world of biofeedback, because even that's a pretty broad range. So
Sure.
it sounded
Yeah.
like you're doing you said heart rate variability biofeedback?
Yep. I also what I also typically like, and typically using it as a for the same reasons you do mindfulness meditation, kind of to center yourself, stillness,
Mm-hmm.
get back to parasympathetic dominance, galvanic skin response as well.
Mm-hmm.
So just sweat response
Mm-hmm.
control, temperature, biofeedback, and then every now and then surface electromyography. So the muscle tension um, for like progressive muscle relaxation. But the easy button that I always go to is just heart rate variability, biofeedback and breath work with, because that's fairly easy to do and quick to set up.
Do you have a
Um,
breath pattern that's your go-to?
um, yeah, the resonance breathing.
Mm-hmm.
So most humans, it's it all falls around 6 breaths per minute. So 4 seconds inhale, 6 second exhale. Doesn't really matter. Typically, a full inhale and exhale cycle with deep diaphragmatic breathing. 10 seconds. You can determine what someone's exact number is because there's certainly variance where maybe for someone's 5.5 breaths per minute or someone else is 7, but 6 is the good average number. And so breathing at that cadence, you see a resonant waveform in biofeedback software, and it's at least the literature supports that it helps with increasing heart rate variability, and it's um, a way to do that very effectively. Not to say that other breathwork styles, because I know there's a lot of them, are not effective,
Well,
but
there's a lot.
that's
There's
the
a lot,
yeah,
right? Legend has
yeah,
it the Navy SEALs invented box breathing, although
oh yeah, that's right,
I've never met a Navy SEAL who claims that's true. Um,
right,
so you're doing really what so and it's really interesting because again, I have uh, a yoga background. So I studied Ashtanga yoga with Tim Miller when I was still in the fitness industry. And it is interesting how we now look at things that are very scientifically grounded, like biofeedback, where we have all these different sensors. I mean, heart rate variability is still, I think, a bit of a mystery to everybody in terms of how you use it in real time. What, what part of the signal are you looking at? But this idea of just maxing your inhalation and your exhalation is, is pranayama level one, right? And then inhale, hold, exhale, hold, box breathing is pranayama cycle number two. So people have been playing with these systems for a long time, and
Yeah.
lo and behold, they work. Yeah. Do you? So a couple questions. So you still teach? Is that right? Are you currently
Yeah.
still teaching in weapon? Yeah,
Yeah. So yeah, I didn't address that
at
part of that,
test. Yeah.
question yet. So yeah, once you get the instructor qualification, you kind of always have that skill set, or you're expected to maintain it. So I don't do it as often anymore as I did at weapon school. It was every
Mm,
flight I was
mm,
the instructor.
yeah.
Now, if you're informal, I'm always kind of informally in that instructor capacity, especially if I'm flying with someone of a more junior qualification or younger in
Hmm.
the jet, where when we go to debrief the flight, then I'll certainly provide some instruction there. But it's not formalized like I did in the combat Air Force, where I'm not
Got it.
putting people through upgrades
Right.
right now, because test actually at flight test, it's only instructors, and that's
Mm,
less because we need instructors to do it. It's because they have the experience from the years in the crucibles to understand at a very detailed level how their aircraft works, and how to then integrate it with new widgets or new things get on jet, but also because we don't really have time to put people through upgrades. So if I have
hmm.
all instructors, I don't need to
Right.
qualify anyone. So
Right. Right.
um, that's kind of the reason.
But you still interact with younger pilots. Yeah. So I'm curious, in my work, very focused on the brain, very focused on cognition and how we process information, our ability to focus, reaction time, all these elements of the work. I'm curious if you see differences in young pilots than you did earlier in your career when you were an instructor, specifically in the cognitive domain. So we talk a lot about the implications of mobile devices. Certainly in my work, I talk a lot about focus changing. I used to talk about focus being broken and kind of taking up the Johan Hari mantle of, technology stolen our focus. I no longer think that's the right paradigm. I think that people who have grown up, with integrated technology, who just it's an appendage. It's always there. Their brains work differently. Their focus is fundamentally different. Do you see that in the pilot community? And if so, do you have advice for young pilots that you share because you learned what you learned and you wish you knew earlier?
Um, I would say I'll answer with, like, there's always, like, this tendency for experienced pilots to think that the next generation is, like, not doing well, or we were so much better than they were. But the realities are that uh, to your point, like, the technology can be super helpful, and we're always looking for efficiencies and how do we cut down time here or there, because time costs money for upgrading pilots. So, for example, like, there's a lot of efforts to shorten pilot training, and do
Hmm.
we really need this fighter fundamentals screening course, or has our training gotten so much better based on technology that I can do the
Mm,
same thing I did in 6 months and make it 4 months? And
yeah.
so, um, for better or worse, there are a lot of cuts that have happened along the way, where the experience that a new pilot has going through the pipeline is going to be different, way different than I had, potentially just based on shortened time, less opportunities to interface with the aircraft, which at the end of the day, regardless of the technology and what's making the training better or not, interfacing with the airframe and how much time you get with the thing is the biggest benefit on the cognitive side, in my experience. So I'd say what hasn't changed, and what I would recommend to any young pilot going through now, is the simulator is, like, I lived in the simulator when I was young in the aircraft.
Mm,
Like, I especially during the qualification course. I was there till the sim building closed. I was still single at the time, so I didn't have anything better to do. But it was open till 9 p.m. I was there till 9 p.m. Just
Uh,
getting repetition after repetition after repetition, because the faster you build that muscle memory component of what I'm doing with my left hand, right hand just happens without me consciously thinking about
uh,
it, the faster you're able to get to that higher order thinking of like, okay, I don't need to think about this anymore in my jet. I can think about, what if I did have a wingman out there? What that radio call that just happened from that strike eagle? Do I need to care about that or
uh,
not? And so
uh.
I think what has it, the requirement for repetition has not changed, and regardless of the technological benefits. So that'd be probably the biggest thing I'd point to.
Yeah, that's an interesting point. So I've had Dr. Tommy Wood on the show, and he talks about headroom cognitively. And it sounds similar. What you're trying to do is you're trying to move as much of the processing into rote processing as possible so that you have bigger space for really frontal lobe thinking, right? Like let's move as much of this into automatic. I understand this equals this equals this equals this. Again, we can go back to the driving the car analogy to bring this full circle, right? You get enough reps. And of course, we've all had the experience where you drive and you're not aware of driving because we have that much experience behind the wheel. We rely on our peripheral vision, and it only doesn't work when something goes wrong, obviously.
Right.
And
Yeah.
yet, what the difference here is, we're not being asked to constantly have this whole new set of challenges in addition to the driving.
Yep.
Yeah. So you
It's
found reps in the sim. Do you try to introduce meditation to younger pilots, or does that feel awkward?
um No, I did. I don't have the opportunity as much anymore, but I did at the weapons school when I went back to teach there, because I had finished the master's. So I'm like, you know what? All the things I learned via trial and error, at least in the four ship flight upgrade and then going to weapons school, I wish I knew when I was going through it. And I wish
Hmm.
someone was willing to talk to me about that kind of stuff, where instead of it's always uh, you did or didn't do the thing in the jet, peeling that onion back one more layer. And it's like, is there like something holding back the student
Hmm.
that's totally outside of what we just did airborne today?
Hmm.
Some of that happens in fighter squadrons where you kind of understand the person's life situation, but giving them those skill sets, just like I teach them how to, best employ their weapons. I can teach at least my experience or what I know at evidence-based practices to make sure that they're in the appropriate state to execute
Hmm.
as to the highest
Hmm.
level. So yeah, when I came back, I ran the human performance program at the weapons school that I inherited from Bain. And at least in my own squadron in the 433rd, I would at least introduce the students to biofeedback and resonance breathing. And I gave academics to the whole weapons school on, tried and true, um, psychological techniques like that, cognitive reframing and
Hmm.
um, thought centering, and a lot of sports psychology is
Hmm.
super applicable.
Hmm.
And so, yeah, I that's probably what I've enjoyed the most about, you know, doing this, like learning it on the side and getting the master's, is I can actually apply it. I can teach people
That's good.
how to do it. And so yeah, I definitely do at least introduce it. Whether they keep up with it, I don't know.
Yeah, you
But
don't know. Yeah, but
my hope
there's
is
almost
that,
we plant seeds. We're not growing forests,
right.
right? Yeah,
Yeah.
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 Well, that was fascinating. It was really interesting. I'm curious, as we head here towards the end of the hour, what would your advice be to someone who wakes up one day and thinks, "Man, I think I wanna fly jets."
Yeah. I think I'm trying to. So, when I was growing up, I had the benefit of, my my godfather was a backseater in F-14. I got postcards all the time. Watch Top Gun. I'm like, this is what I want to do. Um, I think the first thing I recognize and I would recommend is that obviously the first step is to get to a position where you can even be in the running, which takes the academic rigor of at a young age. Like, you gotta
Mm,
get top grades, you gotta be doing the extracurriculars. Your best shot at getting along the path is to go to a military academy, because it's
mhm,
just there's more slots available for pilots. And so that's what the route I did. It's not the only one. You can
mhm,
go to any 4-year college and join an ROTC program. but all of that required academic rigor as a young person. And so I knew I wanted to fly, and I like to play flying video games, I guess, but I didn't spend really any time prior to um, going to college thinking about flying, other than I did, pay to fly in the side seat of like a Cessna just to make sure like there wasn't something like physically that
Ah,
I,
this is
yeah,
wrong.
yeah,
I was
exactly. So I
wrong.
would recommend that, like, get a flying experience. So
There
you're
you
like,
go.
this is actually what I expected it to be or not. Um, and then from there, uh, every flying opportunity once you're in that arena that you can take it. Like for me at the academy, it was a glider uh, soaring instructor and soaring
Mm,
program that I joined.
mm,
So at least at the Air Force Academy, there's a lot of flying programs that you can get involved in. Because the more flight time you have, just you're going to be off to a stronger start when you get to pilot training. Um, and then when you finally do get to pilot training, it may have been it certainly worked out for me at the time, but I do reflect back and wonder if my mindset was the right one, where I had someone early on at pilot training say like, hey, if you want a particular airframe, every day at pilot training is like the Super Bowl and you have to treat it that way. I'm like, and I did, and I worked my butt off from start to finish, because it was like, you're in it, this is your one shot to get the aircraft you want. And so you need that level of drive, but um not to the point of letting it, where every single day is, you let the stress overwhelm. Like, again, another example of, I wish I had the skill set I learned later in that. But yeah, once you're in that crucible, you got to put in the time. You got to sacrifice a lot of like the fun stuff
mhm.
if you want to get where you want to go there. So that's kind of how I would frame it, I think.
Excellent. Well, Mach, it was a pleasure, as I knew it would be. I learned a lot. I, yeah, it was great to learn a lot about you, but also about the whole process. And I look forward to continuing to collaborate together. I am going to give you, I have to finish this, my obligation, with a little bit of a, of a neurotrainer plug, because I've looked at the dashboard and I haven't seen you in the headset lately.
Oh, I actually haven't recognized that. I'm like, I really do need to get back. In fact, after this, how about this? I will log in because I've got martial arts later, and I'll get primed up for it.
There you go.
But yeah,
Well, I think for me, one of the great gifts of neurotrainers, I get to meet people like yourself and graciously get invited into these communities and really learn more about the work that you do. And as I said earlier, really the grace and the dignity you bring to it. So thank you for your service, and thank you for spending time with us. And I look forward to seeing you out in Nellis.
yeah, same. No, I'll say right back at you. I think it's a super exciting time to be in this human performance field if you're interested in it, because at least Air Force wise, and I know Nellis 53rd Wing, like one of our major like focus areas is this human machine teaming and how do we do this more effectively. And so the time is right for these types of conversations and to be in this field. And so yeah, thanks again for having me on.
My pleasure. Thanks.